I'm Allison Jonjak, the Cranberry Outreach Specialist with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension. These videos are the on-demand recordings of UW Extension and the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association's virtual brown bag lunch series. These monthly sessions offer growers and researchers a way to share timely and relevant information. We hope you'll enjoy and continue to engage with us.
Hi, I'm Tom Lochner, the Executive Director of the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association. We're excited to be a partner with Extension to bring you research-backed resources, tools, and tips to keep Wisconsin marshes productive and profitable.
Hand it over to you.
Okay. Well, thanks, Allison, and good afternoon to everybody, and happy Friday. Welcome to our July version of the Cranberry Brown Bag seminars. As I was putting together a newsletter this morning, I was thinking about how long it's been since we've actually met in person, and Tuesday was the first in-person event that we've had since the Wisconsin Cranberry Board met in person in Wisconsin Dells on March 17th, 2020. So it was good to see people face to face and get out, and I think most folks enjoyed it. And we are going to continue to use virtual platform because it just seems very valuable and efficient to deliver information to the grower community without requiring you to travel. And you can join us for an hour and then get about your day. So anyway, we're going to continue to do that, but we also have a live events coming up. The next big one is in August 11th at Whittlesey Cranberry for the WSCJ Summer Meeting, Field Day, and Trade Show, and we hope you'll all be there. We're looking to have a great show on a great property with a wonderful family who's excited about hosting the event. And I think also, just for members' knowledge, the WSCGA office is going to be back open and running under normal hours from 8:30 to 4:30. We're doing it now, but July 1st is the effective date that we're going to do that. Other than that, welcome you to it. Thanks to Allison and Leslie and Amaya and Pam for appearing, and everybody for helping out in putting these programs together. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Allison and thank her for all that she's been doing for us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. And I appreciate everybody's flexibility as I'm going to be doing 3 different trial applications today. So I said we'll do the brown bag from the site, so I can just jump outside. But that has had a little hiccup in the connection on the way there. But still very glad to be here. And I guess the next 2 trials I'll be putting out will be fungicide ones. So I'm glad to hear from Leslie on fruit rot. Lots of, I guess today and these couple of weeks are our go hours. So Pam, do you want to go ahead and share your screen and start your observations? Oh, we do have one question just came in on 14. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Oh, it's just to my own. Okay. So after starting 14 applications on Stevens, how often should I apply on average beds? How many units are ideal per application?
I
think we're gauging based on our nitrogen amount.
Yeah.
Right.
I would say that my recommendation is try not to put more than 20 actual units of nitrogen per application. I feel like that is like, top. I would prefer to go with between, 10 to 15. Reduce that. I know that it's difficult, as we were saying, like try to get all of it, but I think it's better because then you can see how they react and how often you should do it. It will depend on what do you see after the application. So if in 3 days you see that those vines, you did the application, after 3 days you see that bed it still needs more fertilizer, you just go back and put the next one that within 7 days, and then you wait 3 days to see how it reacts to that, and then you go and you apply it again. That would be my recommendation. How much in general? Again, there's no magic number. It will all depend on how they react to what you're putting and your estimated yield based on previous years and what your nutrient analysis show. But I mean, I already think that there's such a variability depending on how much fruit those beds will be producing, that you need to base it a little bit on your historical data. And this is why it's good to have records of your nutrient analysis, because if you see that those levels are going up, it means that you maybe are putting just too much and you can cut it down. Or if you see that those levels are going down over years, let's say your percentage of nitrogen or phosphorus, potassium, maybe that you need to put a little bit more. So sorry that I don't have, I mean, there's no recipe here. It will depend on case by case.
Amaya, when do you suggest, like, maybe is it a February activity to go over your past year's nutrient applications and look at what your long-term trends are, or is that this time of year, or?
This time of the year is already too late. So this is something definitely a winter sort of analysis. Start thinking about what are you going to plan for the following year? Obviously, under the assumption that everything is going to be wonderful, you're going to have a great winter and everything is going to work just fine. But having already a plan and then adjusting based on something concrete is so much easier than during this time where so many things are happening, and making decisions the last minute when you're stressed and anxious about it is always a bad idea in everything in life. So if you can plan in advance, yes, winter will probably be the ideal time to do that.
Okay, I'm just going to get going into that. If you guys have more questions, just keep putting them in the chat or ask. But I'm going to start with the obvious, the weather extremes. Our last brown bag was May 21st. So right after that, we had a really low temperatures. May 29th, I think this grower shared, so Russ, thanks Russ, his screenshot from his from inside the bed. So the yellow is the temperature and the dew point is the green. So it got down to 32 in the bed and the dew point was 31. Very, very cold. We went out to scout on Monday and we were seeing these red vines everywhere. But then 10 days later, everything, or actually right after that, the temperatures went up. And this was 4 days later, the vines just greened up immediately. And then 10 days after that, that's where we saw this big swing, the 75-degree swing. But it went up to 107 in the bed. So we'll talk more about that. First of all, this is good because Amaya just talked about this, the frost spots, so pies and bow ties. If you do not have any little spots like this on your marsh after that really cold frost event, consider yourself lucky because we are seeing this everywhere. And just, yeah, what Amaya said, just try and treat this differently than the rest of the bed. It might be a pain. These little spots, maybe not so much, but like these larger spots definitely is going to be worth treating a little bit different. And then let's go back to moving ahead from June 9th, 8th, 9th, 10th, when we had these really warm temperatures all day. And then let's look at our nighttime temperatures. We really didn't fall that much below 60 all night long. So what happened? We found some drought, not a whole lot of drought, but mainly your dry spots or newer plantings that just kind of caught you off guard after all of that frost protection. So there's a little bit of that. And mainly it was the heat and the wind, like the combination of the two where these growers kind of had a little bit of drought. But this also caused probably the fastest progression that I've seen in years of our bloom. So we seemingly went from hooks just starting to boom, full bloom. Definitely gained over 10% a day. And this affected our, like Leslie mentioned, the fungicide timing and also our bee arrival. You guys, some of you just call your bee guy a couple days before you need them, but if you gain 20-30% in a day, then you're kind of getting them a little later than you normally would. But this week they were working really well. It's not as hot this week. And yeah, they were both out there working. But it is a little comforting what Leslie said, like we're in a drought. So that fungicide timing, those of you that usually shoot for that early, like 10 to 15 to 20%, and you missed it, and you did it more at like 30%, it's hopefully going to be okay. We don't have that crystal ball for sure, but it's comforting to know that it's not spreading like crazy out there during a drought. And then our spring pests. So we started seeing thresholds of our normal spring pests, like around this roughneck early hook stage. This is a cutworm. And for the most part, everybody got really good control of their spring pests. And then now after the sprays, we're seeing a few webs of sparg and fireworm, but nothing too crazy. And we're starting to see flights in our traps. I'll give you a blunt nose update. In the spring, this little guy, this is what he looked like back May 18th. And I have a cranberry leaf there for just to give you a size comparison. This is the same day on top of the leaf. Here we are almost a month later, and they probably like tripled in size. I intentionally used 2 different colors just to remind you that they vary. Their color varies from this yellow to almost, well, actually there's like an almost clear stage before this yellow, there's a tan, there's this gray, and then there's like a black. And here it is this is under a hand lens, sorry, it's backing up. Under the hand lens, this is just with my cell phone. And then underneath a scope, just a closer look at them. But for the growers that had them this spring, OPs worked really well. Orthene, Lorsban, and Imidan were primarily the ones we used. I'm sure diazon would have worked really well too, but we like to save that for later. This week was the first week we really started noticing the false blossom signs. If your plant stage is still around like the hook stage, they'll look like this, just straight up textbook signs. And then if you are starting to move into bloom, you're gonna see this witch's broom with your flowers opening straight up like that. And what else is going on? So we are doing the nematodes again this year. We're using Sean's new technique. We were able to harvest 41 million in 3 harvests. Last night, I delivered about 21 million over to Mike, and he sent me this picture from last night. So he started applying his after the sun went down and then the rainstorm was coming in. I also took some over to City Point with Seth. He gave me this picture. So he put his on first thing in the morning because they're going to irrigate anyway. Again, just to make sure the sun's down, no direct light. But this technique works a lot better. And both of these beds are really, really hot flea beetle beds. So I'm excited to see if it's going to work, because if it doesn't, then yeah, no, it's going to be obvious because these beds are so bad. Okay, and then looking ahead, we're working on catching up with those fungicides. We started calculating some percent out some properties this week. We're going to do more of that next week and start timing that fruitworm spray. Anybody who has fireworm hotspots, we're going to be targeting those in the coming weeks. And yeah, just working on getting the rest of the fungicides on. And then fruitworm is next. And that is all I have.
Thank you. Hopefully we'll start to see some questions pop in here. We are, I guess, we haven't got Sean and the entomology team on today, but the third stop on my travels today will be to put on the 10% GED sparg application at Millston at the Cranberry research station. So we're getting, very close to that. If for those who are tracking their GDDs, and I'm grateful to Sean and Brandon in his lab for actually doing the GD calculations there. But just for the record, that's coming up.
Pam, I have a question. You still there?
Yes.
Okay. Traps. When do you
Yes.
put out your traps?
Yeah, so we usually do it right after we spray for those first generation. So we're setting out our sparg and our fireworm first, and then we set out our girdler and our cranberry fruitworm. So
Okay.
once we see them starting to web, the sparg, let's do sparg for example, they start to web, we're gonna spray them. And then the
Mhm.
week after, as we check control, we set the traps, and then we usually see flight the following week. And
Yep.
we
Okay.
very similar timing with fireworm, but yeah, we did have numbers of our fruitworm pretty much like right away.
How long do you keep your pheromones in the trap for? Do you reuse them, or do you switch them out after a certain amount of time?
Yeah, so we've done a little lure study a couple years back now with how long they last and things like that. So we try to reuse them as long as we can, and we do a couple of properties. We have a extra loaded cranberry fruitworm lure out to see if that can stretch for the whole season. Yeah, those little things are expensive, so we'd like to just be able to use them the whole season. As long as we can get to peak and then it starts trailing off.
Yeah.
It's the third generation fireworm. We kind of worry about whether it's going to be effective that long.
Thank you.
I'm going to take a quick poll of people who are on here, as long as my internet will let me, asking who sets their own traps, who has an IPM scout set traps, and who is not using traps right now. And I'm going to make this one anonymous.
I can talk a little bit about traps while you do that. So mainly our traps are used as like indicators of how much pressure, and we use them to determine peak and when to expect hatch. They're just a tool to use. We like fireworm, for example, once we see 3 weeks of flight, then we know we can look for eggs, and we can find eggs, and then we can time that spray based on that. And the other ones, yeah, same thing, just really an indicator of where the pressure is going to be, and we use it as a tool.
Mm-hmm. And do we have any other questions while that poll is going, either for Amaya on any of our nutrient timing, or for Leslie on any of our fungicide information? Are there people, I know I've seen a little bit of casseron damage here and there, a little bit of winter damage here and there over the course of the year. Are people taking Amaya's advice to heart and checking on that new growth before doing spot fertilizing? Alex, how's our poll percent? Yeah, so it looks like we have, of the respondees, 19 people, which is 90%, have their IPM scout do the trap setting, and then 2 people for 10% manage their traps themselves. So a lot of you have your scouts doing that, which kind of makes sense why Stephen would be checking on the specifics. Sometimes things are best handled by the experts. We have, I know last meeting we were right up to the 1 o'clock hour and even a minute or two past, but we've got still 6 or 7 minutes here. People can feel free to ask questions, whether via the chat, or again, if you're out and about in the truck, just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask a question. I don't want to take away anybody's time from our specialists here. And I guess I'll just also ask, Amaya, you've been in cranberries for a while, and Pam, you've been in cranberries for a while. Well, Leslie, this is your first season. How, for any of you, is this the fastest bloom progression you've seen, or have you seen them faster in the past? Oh, good. And then we have a good calcium question after that.
I can answer. So I kind of answered it already, but it was really fast this year. We've had years where it went fast, but I had a few growers call or text and they're like, I am literally watching my blossoms open like that last weekend. And then just being caught off guard with their bees are on their way, but they're not here when they typically have them in place. So I don't know. Yeah, I guess Christelle's not here, but the pollination and how that's all going to play. Maybe Amaya can, I don't know, is it going, growers are a little nervous, like, is it going to be okay? Like I usually get my bees at 15% or 10%. They didn't come till 30 or peak. How is that going to affect my crop?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, I can talk about that. I think that I have had many other fruit growers, not cranberry growers, ask me the same thing. I think that the problem with the bloom coming so fast is that overall just the flowers decay faster because it's very hot. So the senescence of the flower is faster, and you have a kind of like a shorter period to get that fertilization to happen, to get those bees to pollinate, move that pollen into the stigma, and once the pollen is in the stigma, those pollen tubes are going to grow really fast, and the fruit is going to be set. But it's like, do we have enough time for those bees to visit all of them? And I think that that's probably the concern. Now, even if it's really hot and things go fast, if the vines are well irrigated, and here's again the checking your soil moisture probes and keeping an eye on irrigation. If the vines are well irrigating, even though things are still going to progress fast, I think that really helps keeping those blossoms still viable for a little bit longer. So I would say that that's the biggest recommendation right now, is just to keep irrigating. There's a question about if applying calcium, when is the best time? So there's the question in the chat. Actually, we don't know. This is something that my lab just started working on calcium fertilization and looking at calcium. But I can tell you what we know from other fruit crops, and I think the closest one would be everything that happened in blueberries, because they're almost like sister species with cranberries. And what we do know is that calcium moves in the plant with transpiration flow. So if you take a foliar analysis, you take your tissue analysis, and you take the leaves, and you do an analysis, and you look at calcium, leaves always are going to have a lot of calcium, because the calcium moves through the organs that are transpiring, and the organs that transpire are leaves. That's how the plants keep cool. And so fruits don't transpire a lot. And what we do know on cranberries is that the fruits have very little stomata, which is that those openings in the leaves where the water vapor is being released, and that's how plants transpire. So the fruit has very little stomata, and so that means that there's a very low transpiration rate, which then means that there's very little movement of calcium towards the fruit. The other thing that we know is that those stomata are completely covered with wax by the time that we start seeing some blush on the fruit. So when the fruit starts getting, when it turns like kind of white color right before you start seeing some of that red pigmentation happening, during that time, those little stomata are starting to get covered with wax, which means they're sealed and there's no more transpiration, there's no more calcium moving in there. So if I were to bet on something, I would say the sooner you fertilize with calcium once the fruit are set, the better. And so try to put the calcium now, because now is when those stomata are open and the fruit will be transpiring, and some of that nutrient uptake, that calcium uptake, is going to actually be translocated to the fruit. That's where you want it for firmness, and not the leaves. Hopefully in the next 3 years, we're gonna learn a lot about calcium and how it affects fruit firmness and how we can fertilize, and what's happening with with post-harvest and sweet and dry cranberry production when we fertilize with calcium. So stay tuned.
Amaya, do you have a preferred form of calcium to put out?
I mean, anything that is not going to change pH, so calcium sulfate would be a good alternative.
Okay.
Obviously, price plays a role. I don't think you need to do outrageous fertilizations with calcium just to start playing with it. And so if that's the case, you know, if calcium chloride is something that's a little bit cheaper, you could go with that as well. The problem with anything that has chloride, and we'll talk about this for potassium chloride, is that at some point, if you are putting high amounts of chloride, you will end up with salinity problems.
Yep. Awesome. Appreciate that. We are at 1 o'clock, so unless there are any final questions that come in, I want to thank everybody very much today for joining us on a busy day. Thank you to Amaya for all of your nutrient and fertilizer information. Thank you to Pam for all of the observations of, you know, kind of the whole gamut, and for Leslie for everything with fungicides and fruit rot. Huge thanks to Alex for recording this when I had poor service. Thanks to UW Extension in general, and of course Tom and the Cranberry Growers Association for helping host. I hope everyone has a productive next couple of days, next couple of weeks, because you know these days will really matter. Good to see everyone.